It's Halloween time. At the minute, I'm still far too swept up in Tears of the Kingdom content to really do a proper Halloween special this year. Trust me, I know a ton of creators with great videos on the way if you are looking for that though. Plus, I've been working on some stuff for one of the biggest events ever on this channel and a huge thing for the Zelda community as a whole. More on that next week though. Today, I only want to dip my toes a little bit into the scary stuff and talk about something that's been on my mind since the newest trailers released for the game, and I'd go as far as to say it's been on my mind since the E3 2021 trailer. Our first look into the world of Tears of the Kingdom was extremely dark and spooky in a lot of ways. The music really set the tone for me. A regular piece of Breath of the Wild music mixed in with a tinge of Twilight Princess darkness created the atmosphere with the first look trailer. Along with this, Link and Zelda traversing a cave also seemed to signify that things weren't all going to be about the wildlife above the ground in the next game. It's not focusing on the birds, the foxes. They probably will be in Tears of the Kingdom, but they won't be one of the focal points for the game and its marketing itself. The first trailer was so dark that Aonuma actually came out and said that the new Breath of the Wild, or the sequel to it, is not necessarily going to be related to Majora's Mask or inspired by it. What we showed you currently is a little darker. Directly comparing the game to Majora's Mask in terms of how dark it is, that is pretty bold, and if it wasn't for one word in this sentence, I'd say that we're definitely still getting a dark game in Tears of the Kingdom for sure, even one that's darker than Majora's Mask. But the word currently holds up the entire sentence, meaning that as of that trailer, what they'd shown was dark. But it might not be quite as dark by the time of release, and that feels like the direction it's going. That's not to say that Tears of the Kingdom won't be dark at all though. Ever since that trailer, we've had hints that the game won't be all gorgeous sky vistas and the like. There was a trailer in E3 2021 of course, well over a year ago now, a fact that creeps me out by itself. It really doesn't feel like it's been that long, but the main bulk of that trailer was used to showcase a brand new kind of method of exploration, showing us that we'll be exploring the skies of Hyrule rather than just the land below as we saw in Breath of the Wild. While 90% of the trailer was focused on that, we also got our second look at Hyrule Castle rising from beneath the ground, this time in much more detail, showing a malice-like substance pushing the castle into the sky. With it came a much darker tone too. The end of the trailer played out much more like the first, not being so spooky, but being much darker in essence. For clarification, I don't think that Tears of the Kingdom will be outright spooky in any way after the last two trailers, but I definitely think that there's a chance that it will deliver on that much darker concept given in that first trailer. I don't think that the game will rival Majora's Mask in terms of spookiness, especially, at all anymore. There likely won't be a giant moon about to land on Hyrule, etc, etc. I think that if we are bound to get anything in this regard, it will be some little bits with a darker tone. Breath of the Wild was never the happiest game by itself. It always seems fairly happy when you're walking around the plains of Hyrule, but I feel like we all sometimes forget that the reason why Hyrule is so quiet is because of a huge war that broke out 100 years ago. A war that very few of Link's friends actually made it out of. In terms of world building, Breath of the Wild is extremely dark. Everywhere you look you see ruins of buildings of old, whether it be stone-built structures or places that look far closer to houses. Even Link's house is a very good example of that. It likely belonged to the hero before the calamity broke out, and after, it was lost to time. A beautiful house sat to the side of Hateno village, awaiting a new owner, presumably for an entire 100-year time period. It's seemingly untouched by the calamity, yet Link's possessions were lost along the way. If I wanted to, I could have made a whole Halloween video full of dark parts of Breath of the Wild. Things like enemies nearby to houses being the reason for their destruction and notes made by previous inhabitants. It's crazy to think about how many people died before Breath of the Wild, so while the game isn't the happiest, when you really give yourself a second to really stop and think about it, none of this happens in the story in front of our eyes. As an example, in Ocarina of Time, the Great Deku Tree is used to show us that there are real stakes in the game we're playing. It is a game, but to the citizens of Kakiri Forest at the beginning of the game, it's no game. You have a part to play in killing the Deku Tree, even if you were just trying to save him. This showed us that there is consequences in real time in the game. The Deku Tree didn't die 100 years before the game takes place, he dies right in front of the Hero of Time and gives him instructions on what he needs to do. I want Tears of the Kingdom to have more of that. I want the game to be darker and more tragic as you play the game, not countless years before the game takes place. So what kinds of ways could we see that in the story in the next title in the series? I think there is a really easy one to get out of the way that's been alluded to, but I'm not buying it yet. Zelda has been shown falling into a giant pit a couple of times now. I really don't buy that Zelda is going to die in the opening stages of the game, though I don't think it'd be the worst idea to give the player some drive to stop Ganondorf. Though I also think discarding Zelda from the story so soon after Breath of the Wild again would also be a fairly bad idea, though I'm not against it like some people are. It could lead to a lot of character changes for Link. Seeing Zelda die would give Link a ton of personality for the entire adventure, being hellbent on killing Ganondorf. Though that idea is so cool that I just can't imagine the Zelda team actually going along with it. Ganondorf himself could also be far more scary than he's been seen in other games too. Sure, in every title he is menacing, but I don't think that Ganondorf has ever been genuinely scary, and that's usually down to his design. That's not a bad thing in any sense, that's just how the character is designed. As a somewhat equal to Link in most cases, he's of a different race, but the most like the Hylians of all of the unique races. We already know that Ganondorf is going to feel almost otherworldly in Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, he's likely going to be a corpse of what he once would have been. I wouldn't even be surprised if we get some memories of what the Gerudo Tyrant was like in life if he wasn't one of the exact incarnations of the villains of the past. Ganondorf being a corpse is a great way to change the character and make him genuinely scary, and since we already know he's one of the best magic wielders in the series up till this point, conjuring the calamity in his sleep with all of the effort he could muster, it also makes sense that he could float around due to his ability with magic, much like Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time and, well, pretty much any other incarnation of the character too, with a few exceptions. So I think Ganondorf could make the game a genuinely terrifying experience, perhaps being the scariest form of the character that we've seen, and maybe even being the scariest enemy in the entire series. But I digress, as we'll have to wait for more proof on that. Another way to make the game more scary in my opinion is to add caves. I've talked about caves at length on the channel, but I think they could offer the more scary areas in the world. And since we've likely seen one of these caves in the newest trailer for the game, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we might be seeing some more of these areas. In the past, I'd say the scariest locations of the series have been underground in some capacity. For me personally, namely the Shadow Temple, the bottom of the well, and Arbiter's Grounds are some of the creepiest places in the series. Some of you may also include the Fire Temple and a plethora of other places down to lore, but personally, theming wise, I think those three would be my scariest places. Caves in Tears of the Kingdom could easily house enemies that we've seen in the past that could be used. Maybe a new variant of a Re-Dead, not being quite as cartoon-like as Wind Waker's, but having the same sort of scream mixed in with a more realistic look at the corpses, seen more in Ocarina of Time. Same sort of thing with Gibdos too. There are a number of enemies that could be taken from old games and plopped right into the centre of caves and other creepy areas in Tears of the Kingdom. But I also think that new enemies are also a ton of fun. I don't really have the capacity to create brand new enemies, but I know the Zelda team does, and I know they should create some truly terrifying enemies, especially considering we didn't get our signature spider-like enemies in Breath of the Wild, with the exception of the Guardians, I guess. I want to see more things that people are afraid of in real life getting more time as enemies in the series. Spiders, though that is already done quite a lot, more like scorpions, clowns, and other common phobias. Even sky islands themselves could scare people down to how high up in the sky they are, triggering people's vertigo. I think there's a lot that could make the game scarier, though I do think it's more likely that Tears of the Kingdom doesn't end up being that scary, and instead ends up being more like a usual Zelda game with darker moments inside of it, which wouldn't be too different to the past few entries in the series, really. Though on this night before Halloween, I do hope there are some more genuinely scary plotlines, areas, and enemies that we can play through in the next game in the series. Here are some thoughts on whether Tears of the Kingdom could still deliver on that scarier premise as shown in the first trailer by my Twitter followers. Thanks for the thoughts, guys and girls. Some really great opinions came in as usual. If you want the chance to be featured here next week, make sure to follow my Twitter at Triforce Trends. Plus, you'll also get some announcements that are coming this week. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, then please do support the channel by leaving a like rating and subscribing. You'll get news as quick as possible for Tears of the Kingdom, and you'll join the 25% of people who are subscribed, so thank you a ton if you do. People you can see on screen right now are my Patreon supporters. Thank you all so much for the support, guys. Sumji and Jared Whedon are especially amazing for being my top paying patrons. Just look at the Triforce coloured names and that Triforce font. Thank you so much, it means the world. If you'd like to join them, then you can do for as little as £1 or $1.50 a month. The link to my Patreon and other social platforms are in the description. Plus, I recently made a membership in which you can become heroes on the channel. Just press that join button if you want to join. Thank you so much for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon. Wait, what's that note?